Lee, are you on mute?
Thanks, Rebecca.
Sorry.
So welcome everyone to the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund Study, the invitation to join phase 3. My name is Kelly Green. I am a research scientist with the Center for Health and Safety Culture at Montana State University. The center provides management support and is the principal research entity for this pooled fund. Today, our speakers will be Rebecca Ridenour with the Montana Department of Transportation, Jay Otto and Carrie Finley with the Center for Health and Safety Culture at Montana State University, and Bill Bell, the Executive Director at the Kentucky Office of Highway Safety. So before we begin today, I just wanted to go over a few logistics. So this webinar is being recorded and will be made available later this week on our YouTube channel. If you are disconnected from audio or need to join audio, you can do that either by phone or computer. There is a button at the bottom of your screen that says connect to audio. And then also we ask that you use the chat box to send in any questions. And these questions can be sent to both panelists and the host. And then if you have any technical issues while attending this webinar, feel free to chat me directly and I will do my best to get those figured out for you. There will also be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of today's presentation. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Rebecca Ridenour, the Research Program Manager at the Montana Department of Transportation.
Thanks, Kelly. Welcome to all of you who are listening to this presentation. As Kelly said, this is an invitation to join phase 3 of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what a pooled fund is about. So could you change the slide, please? Thank you. So here's an agenda for today, and Kelly pretty much went over this already. So I will talk a little bit about what a pooled fund study is all about, and specifically how this pooled fund came about. I'll hand it all over to Jay Otto and Carrie Finley with the Center for Health and Safety Culture. We'll have Bill Bell talk a little bit about his experience with the pooled fund from the state of Kentucky. I'll talk a little bit more about the steps that the pooled fund will go through, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So briefly, I wanted to just talk about what is a pooled fund study. Specifically, a transportation pooled fund study. It's administered and supported through the FHWA. And what it really is an opportunity for organizations who have shared interest in a study topic to get together and pool their resources. And so their resources include funding and their expertise. It's an excellent way to tackle a national issue. You can seek solutions across state boundaries or national boundaries. One of the biggest messages I want to give in this webinar today is that anyone can join a pooled fund. It's not just limited to state DOTs or FHWA. Other agencies, either federal, state, or local, are welcome to join us. We can also include private entities, academia, and international organizations. And pooled fund studies run for 5 years. So this is phase 3, which would be starting hopefully in the fall of 24. And phase 2 is rounding out its 5-year study period. There are a lot of benefits to joining a pooled fund. Listed here on the screen are, you can leverage your funds and combine and share resources. It's also an excellent way to create partnerships and to participate in change. So this is a largely like a research study. So you have an opportunity as a participant to be part of the solutions that come out of that study. It gives you an opportunity to network and share ideas and experiences. And you can learn from the partners and other participants about other projects and initiatives. And perhaps the most exciting part is that you get to create synergy around an idea. And like I said, look for those solutions that you can use at home or influence nationally. So we're here today to talk specifically about the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund. This pooled fund started in 2015 and was led by the state of Montana. Pooled funds need to be led either by a state DOT or the FHWA, and so Montana Department of Transportation took the lead in this project. We are coming to the end of the second phase of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund. So there was a first phase that started in 2015. The second phase is ending at the end of September. We had 18 states participate during that period of time, and we generated over $1.4 million of contributed state DOT funds to fund 5 research projects. As the lead state, Montana hosts a website to support the pooled fund. And if you're curious about those 5 research projects, you can find them on this website. Shown is the address for it. And then also shown on that website are the studies that were completed in the first phase of the pooled fund. There's also information there about the management plan for the pooled fund and a few other links. And the website currently also talks about how you can participate if you're not a current member of the pooled fund. I've also listed on this slide the FHWA's website. Their website is a little bit, oh, Kelly, can you go back one? There you go. Thank you. Their website is a little bit more administrative and higher level when it gets to the details of a pooled fund. But specific to this phase 3 solicitation, all of the information that a person would need to know to make a decision if they wanted to join or not can be found on that FHWA website. So a pooled fund operates through commitments and organization of its members. When an entity or an organization decides to commit to that pooled fund, they're committing financial support on an annual basis, and they are also committing a person to be on the technical advisory committee. For this pooled fund, a state gets one technical advisory committee representative for up to $25,000. If an entity or an organization contributes more than $25,000, they can have 2 technical advisory committees members. And so this technical advisory committee acts like a board, and they would meet as soon as all of the commitments are met to move the project from a solicitation phase into an actual study phase. They would have a kickoff meeting to define roles and responsibilities, create a work plan for the pooled fund, and then to set goals and objectives. And that should be an in-person meeting. And then in-person meetings ideally should occur every year for a pooled fund so that they can go through that process of looking at the work plan and setting goals and objectives for the upcoming year. Now I think I will hand off to Carrie or Jay.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. So yeah, I'll just give you a little bit of history that got us into this traffic safety culture pooled fund. So I think for as long as folks have been working on traffic safety, they've recognized this idea that traffic safety culture is a critical part of the work of traffic safety. But it was always, and I mean, it still is a very complex topic and one that's kind of hard to get your arms around. So NCHRP really leaned into this issue really about 2012, I think the conversation started, to create a research project that they funded which was called 1769 and a strategic approach to transforming traffic safety culture. And the center was the principal investigating agency on that. Nick Ward, our director, was the formal principal investigator. And out of that project came, a working definition on traffic safety culture and some ideas about moving forward. And that really led to the center reaching out to MDT and saying, hey, what if we could partner together on putting together a pooled fund to work and advance this idea of traffic safety culture? And MDT was, very also recognized the need to do this work, was a leader in that, and so they were willing to take that on. And so that launched the first pooled fund, and then that led to the second, which kicked in about 2020. So on the next slide, we've got a research progression that we created to sort of think about how to tackle this very complex topic. And it was really to begin with, well, how might we define it, traffic safety culture? If we could define it, how might we then measure it? And then based on how we could measure it, can we think about growing it and think about strategies or countermeasures or approaches to develop traffic safety culture, as well as ways that we could think about evaluating both the impact of traffic safety culture as well as the effectiveness of potential countermeasures or strategies. And so that research progression has actually been also adopted by another NCHRP project, which is recently concluded, which is 1796, which was looking at a roadmap for traffic safety, a research roadmap for traffic safety culture. And they use these four domains as well. And so the first work of this pooled fund was about sort of thinking about what's the best behavioral model and how we might think about applying that behavioral model to look at some traffic safety issues. So on the next slide, you'll see a definition, a working definition. And NCHRP's 1769, the first one, was really about exploring what makes sense for a potential definition. And defining culture or traffic safety culture is very difficult. There's no one definition. And so we really promoted this definition as a definition, not necessarily the only one or the perfect one, but a definition. And most definitions of culture, in particular around safety culture and organizational culture, tend to look at cognitions or belief systems and how those belief systems influence behaviors. And so we started to use this definition, traffic safety culture, as the shared belief system of a group of people that influences behaviors that impact traffic safety. And I think key out of this is the notion that, yes, this includes road user behaviors, which is traditionally where we've often focused, but also very importantly, it recognizes the belief systems of stakeholders. So all of us working in this space have an aspect of traffic safety culture, and law enforcement has an aspect of traffic safety culture, and parents have an aspect of traffic safety culture as they potentially think about their children becoming drivers. And so a wide array of stakeholders have shared belief systems that influence their behaviors that can impact traffic safety. So it goes well beyond road users. And this recognition that there are a lot of different beliefs. It is not about one belief, but multiple beliefs that start to influence multiple behaviors. So even though the definition may appear as pretty straightforward, it becomes very complex quickly. So on the next slide, this is just a very quick image of a more complex behavioral model that we've used in the past to sort of think about different kinds of beliefs and how those beliefs may then start to influence a willingness and intention to engage in risky or protective behaviors. So we could think about understanding these kinds of beliefs with an individual and their decision about wearing a seatbelt, but we could also think about these kinds of beliefs about a law enforcement officer or a law enforcement leader choosing to really promote traffic safety enforcement. We could think about these kinds of beliefs as influencing a workplace and a workplace leader's decision about having traffic safety policies. So this model can be applied to a wide array of situations and contexts, not just road user behavior, but we certainly began the work in the first rounds of the pooled fund looking at road user behavior. So we can simplify this model, and you'll see on the next slide, just into these broad categories, sort of values, what's important to us, and how what's important to us will shape our beliefs about behavior. And we want to look at a wide array of beliefs about a behavior, but then recognizing those beliefs, along with other factors, will start to influence our engagement in those behaviors, and the level of engagement on those behaviors will start to influence consequences like crashes, serious injury crashes, fatality crashes, things like that. So the other thing that we recognize on the next slide, when we think about a cultural approach, we really want to recognize that culture exists, yes, among individuals, but we really learn about our culture from these nested layers of relationships. So certainly as we think about children growing up, they learn an enormous amount from their families. As people get older, they start to branch out from their families. They learn much from their peers. Of course, young people will go to schools and they'll learn from those schools. But they also, all of us engage with a wide array of workplaces, not only where we may work, and that workplace can influence our beliefs, but we may engage with a lot of other organizations and workplaces too. Like we go to a doctor, and that one doctor or healthcare provider could speak to many different people in our community. And we may have to go to the hospital, and the hospital could talk to us about aspects of traffic safety. And we may have a faith community that talks about aspects of family or values or different things that may influence us. So there are a wide array of sort of organizations and workplaces that we can come in contact with, and they will teach us culture as well. And then outside of that, we certainly have community level organizations like our elected leaders and the rules and laws and policies that they create that sort of create and codify the norms of acceptable behavior in community. And then of course we have law enforcement whose task is to help folks follow those laws, and obviously the whole judicial system that is following up. So there are many entities at each of these layers, but it's interesting for us when we think about traffic safety culture, we want to think beyond just the individual, and we want to think about what are the shared beliefs amongst families or parents, and how about amongst workplaces, and how could we grow those in a way that support traffic safety? So you'll see when we look at some of the projects, how we've looked at projects at different layers of the social ecology, because that's really where culture starts to live and breathe and is transferred to new folks, and where it's sustained. So the social ecology is a really critical idea, and we're seeing that really come out now as well in the safe system approach, which is encouraging us to think about systems approaches, not just individual approaches, but how we're impacting systems, and how these various systems like safer roads, safer vehicles, safer people, all interact and intersect with the social environment as well. So on the next slide, we go back to that research progression, and the early part was thinking about definition and a way and a model to use. And then the early pooled fund projects looked at these kinds of issues, like what are the shared beliefs about people who choose to drive after cannabis, and people who use cannabis but choose not to drive after cannabis? And how do their belief systems, how are they similar and how are they different? And how might that inform countermeasures to reduce driving after using cannabis? We also looked at this idea of traffic safety citizenship, or proactive traffic safety, where what are the beliefs that exist among some people who are very comfortable asking somebody else to wear a seatbelt if they're not wearing a seatbelt? And how do those differ from other folks who might be in the same situation but are very uncomfortable asking somebody else to wear a seatbelt? Because we know it's very difficult for us in these roles in organizations and at a high level working on traffic safety. We're going to need a whole lot more allies to help us work on traffic safety. So traffic safety citizenship or proactive traffic safety was this idea to explore the shared beliefs amongst folks about, asking somebody to put down their cell phone or to wear a seatbelt and things like that. We then did a project specifically on one part of the social ecology. So thinking about law enforcement and how do different law enforcement agency types, like a statewide agency, a highway patrol, a sheriff's office, or a police department, do they have different views about traffic safety? And what is it about some of those leaders that encourage more efforts to work on traffic safety and other leaders who don't? And could we create some tools to grow their engagement in traffic safety? And then we looked at projects. We started to ask the question, if about 90% of the population is wearing a seatbelt, is there anything different about that last 10%? Do we want to treat the last 10% the same way we treated the first 90%? And could there be other things going on, like this phenomenon called psychological reactance? And so what we learned was that, yes, people who tend never to wear their seatbelt have a very different reaction to seatbelt messaging than people who always wear their seatbelt. And they may become angry about those ads, and that anger may actually make them less likely to wear their seatbelt. So that makes us think, well, if we're going to grow their behavior to wear a seatbelt, we might want to communicate with them differently and think about this issue of reactance. And then another project looking at promoting workplace policies. So these are just some quick examples of some of the projects that we've done, looking at aspects of how we might measure traffic safety culture. And once we measured it, how it then gave us some information or guidance about then approaching the communication or strategies differently. And so out of these projects came things like primers, short reads, primers or primers, depending upon how you say it, sort of short reads that could help traffic safety specialists learn more about ideas like traffic safety culture or proactive traffic safety. We developed, slide decks and things like that to help the communication, discussion guides, different resources, messaging guides, to just give folks insights based on what we learned from measuring traffic safety culture about how they may act and do some of their countermeasure work differently. So then in the subsequent phases, we've really moved into more about how can we think about and grow specific countermeasures or strategies to address some very common traffic safety concerns. So we know aggressive driving is a concern. Some areas saw increases in aggressive driving, perhaps during the pandemic. So one, how might we understand aggressive driving? And what might be some understanding of what's going on with folks who are engaging in aggressive driving that then might inform a way to reduce that? We just submitted the draft final report on a very exciting project on multi-risk driving. As you all may know, when you find folks who engage in one risky driving behavior, let's say speeding or potentially driving impaired, sometimes they also engage in other risky driving behaviors like not wearing a seatbelt or driving distracted. So was there something about folks who are engaging in multiple risky driving behaviors, and might we approach that a little bit differently than just thinking about those behaviors as being isolated? So there's a multi-risk driving project to develop and test an intervention. This was with young adults, and looking at a virtual online tool that could help inform and use some of what we learned based on some of the beliefs those individuals might have, and how we might look at shifting some of those beliefs and decreasing some of those risky behaviors. And then a project which we just got some initial feedback on, thinking about growing pedestrian safety, but doing it through the lens of stakeholders, not necessarily directly focusing on individuals who are crossing the street or walking, but really focusing on those higher level folks who are maybe in a position to think about designing roads or engaging in a complete streets approach, or thinking about maintaining or potentially updating roads. So these are the sort of higher level stakeholders, and how could we grow supportive beliefs amongst those individuals to engage in what we know as best practices to improve pedestrian safety? Because there are a number of pedestrian safety best practices we can do that will improve the environment, but how can we grow support for those so that those get deployed more often? And out of these projects was really looking at more resources and tools. So there were some other projects that were done. Rebecca talked about the website that MDT hosts. So that lists all the projects. It has all the final reports as well as some of the products. So you can start to see some of the things that are created out of that. What we want to do now is pause and take a moment for a participant in the pooled fund, Bill Bell. And Bill, just have you share a few words about what it's been like to be a part of the pooled fund from your perspective as a member and as a board member. And Bill, you look like you're off mute, but we're not hearing you yet. So you might check your microphone mute. No, oh, you just came through.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks again. So I joined as a new employee of Kentucky Office of Highway Safety, the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Jason Sawala was the former representative from Kentucky. So it was very eye-opening from my perspective, from coming from the behavioral side. And so we talked about the safe system approach here. We're definitely bought in. You have to be bought in to not only safe system approach, but also changing the culture, the traffic safety culture. And that's how we're going to get some major change because you can't, I heard somebody make a comment earlier, you can't eat the elephant all in one sitting. It's one bite at a time. And so we want that cultural change, we want that generational change. So it has to happen over time, but we have to start it now. And so that's what I like about this program. And we actually, everybody has plans. Now we have the triennial highway safety plan. You have the strategic highway safety plan. You have the highway safety plan. So HSIP has their plan. So, what do we do with all these plans? And we spend months formulating these plans. So, we've been talking over the past few years, we can't let these collect dust. We have to execute these plans. And so when we received the pedestrian safety report from the Traffic Safety Culture Group, and so I gave that to our secretary's office, and they looked at it. Everyone in upper management looked at this report, from the state highway engineer to our deputy secretary, and so they loved it. And we have a problem, as many states do in their major metropolitan areas, especially Louisville, Kentucky, very high rate of pedestrian crashes and fatalities, and they represent about 30 at the time, about 35% of pedestrian fatalities. So we created a task force. We used the pedestrian safety report from the Traffic Safety Culture Group as a blueprint almost. We actually had some language from that report in our initial kickoff. So, and so we were able to, we had a slight decrease in pedestrian fatalities in 2023, which is great. However, we did have a major increase in another city, in Lexington. So guess what we're doing? We're taking the show on the road, and so we're keeping it going in Louisville. Now we're in Lexington, and there's other. It's not just the major cities. So there are other towns and other areas in the state that need attention. So and so that's what we're going to do, and we're definitely going to use this report to hopefully make a difference and we think we will be very positive. And we're also going to be looking at the aggressive driving report, because that is an issue, and it's been an issue since COVID. And so we've estimated that at least 33% of crashes are related to aggressive driving, including speed. So, and I'll announce this today. We've talked about adding a second person to the committee from Kentucky. So I'm from the behavioral side. We have someone from the HSIP side. And so we haven't finalized that, but we're talking about it and giving that some serious consideration. And so that's what we think about this group and the program and the research and studies and reports, the end result that we get. So, I think it's very worthwhile.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bill. We really appreciate you joining us today and sharing some of those experiences. I think what I'm going to do now is turning it over to the director for the Center for Health and Safety Culture to talk a little bit about where the pooled fund is potentially thinking about going into the future.
Thanks, Jay. We're really excited about the work of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund over the past 10 years, really, like Jay said, to understand and measure and grow traffic safety culture. And we're looking forward to moving into another 5-year cycle of phase 3 of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund. And we're energized about this work, and we would love to invite you to join this effort. So let's talk briefly. Next slide, please, Kelly. Let's talk briefly about the focus for a phase 3 Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund and the benefits of joining this pooled fund for you or for your state or organization. And then I'll turn it back over to Rebecca to talk about really how to join this effort. So overarching, our focus for a phase 3 Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund is to really build on what we've learned in phase 1 and 2 and focus more specifically on implementation efforts to positively affect traffic safety culture. In phase 1 and 2, our research really did focus on defining and measuring traffic safety culture and then also implementing strategies to promote positive traffic safety culture and address risky driving, like Jay talked about. And the research projects that were selected in phase 1 and 2 addressed a variety of different issues or traffic safety issues, everything from, driving under the influence of alcohol and cannabis to proactive traffic safety or the role of law enforcement. And when we move into phase 3, our focus will be to build on what we've learned in those projects. And then together with our pooled fund members to decide on what culture-based traffic safety problems we want to focus on for this phase of the project. We want to create tools and resources that practitioners can use to positively influence culture in their organizations or in their communities. And then we want to support the technology transfer of best practices in traffic safety culture. Overall, together, our focus for phase 3 will be to continue to support the transformation of traffic safety culture within our families and our communities and our states. So you might be wondering, what are the benefits to joining this Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund? Essentially asking yourself, how will joining this pooled fund help you in your work or in your state or in your organization? Joining phase 3 of the pooled fund, I think, can really support your work in growing positive traffic safety culture. And when we think about a positive traffic safety culture, it can support a lot of the efforts you're currently working on. A positive traffic safety culture can support adoption of the safe system approach, and it can help you to achieve the goals that you've set out in all of those planning efforts, reducing risky behaviors, increasing protective behaviors. And growing positive traffic safety culture can also increase the community's support for implementing effective traffic safety countermeasures. We know that, and like Bill said, culture change takes time. And we know there isn't one simple single strategy that's going to work. But through collaboration and implementing strategies that influence shared beliefs, we can improve traffic safety culture and ultimately help us to get to our ultimate goal of reducing fatalities to 0 fatalities and serious injuries. Next slide, please. So growing traffic safety culture has been identified as a core strategy of the US DOT Safety Council, FHWA's Joint Safety Strategic Plan. It's been identified as a strategy of the National Towards Zero Deaths Safety Initiative and the Road to Zero Coalition. So joining this next phase of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund can help you and your state or organization be really at the forefront of growing traffic safety culture. Like Jay talked about in phase 1 and 2, we worked together as a group to really define what traffic safety culture looked like and what were we doing to measure it and how were we implementing strategies to promote traffic safety culture and address risky behaviors. And all of this work was really done in partnerships with this group who have joined the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund. Joining this pooled fund, I think, gives you a seat at the table to have a say in, what projects are selected and to address what, areas of concern you have in your organization or in your state. You'll get the opportunity to have a voice in that decision-making process about what projects are selected and really what's important to you in your work to grow a positive traffic safety culture. Next slide, please. The current members of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund have been really intentional over the last phases of this pooled fund. They've been really intentional about taking what we've learned through the research and translating that learning to develop tools and resources and things that are useful and relevant and that can be implemented. So in this next cycle, our hope is to continue that intention of creating tools for practitioners that can impact culture in their organizations and communities. Joining the pooled fund will allow you to be informed about tools and resources right when they're available to grow a positive traffic safety culture, and you're going to get several tools to add to your toolbox of strategies as they're being created as well. And then finally, as a member of the pooled fund, you're going to be a part of a group that is working on traffic safety culture. You'll have this group to share ideas and resources with, to problem solve and collaborate. You'll have the opportunity to network and learn from others, and all of which I think can be really useful in propelling your work to improve traffic safety forward. You're definitely not alone in this work. And you'll be a part of just a larger group of people who care about traffic safety culture and making change, and we can work on this issue together. So we are excited about the work of the Traffic Safety Culture Pooled Fund and would invite you to be a part of that. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca to really talk about what that looks like, how to join this effort.
Carrie. So joining the pooled fund is really as easy as 1, 2, 3, shown on the screen. Right now, the pooled fund is the phase 3 idea is what's in the solicitation phase. So what that means is that we are actively looking for partners to make commitments to be a part of the next phase. Once we achieve our goals, then the project will move out of the solicitation phase and become a fully funded transportation pooled fund research study. So starting with step number 1, if you are interested or want to learn more, please go to the FHWA website and enter in solicitation number 1621, and you can learn about what the requirements are to join and what the goals are for the study for the next phase. If you're interested in joining, you can make a commitment. Now, DOTs and FHWAs are the only ones that can make the commitment directly through the FHWA Pooled Fund website. If there's anybody that hears this and is outside of those entities, please contact me and I will help you get committed. Once we reach our commitment goal and the project becomes a fully funded study, we will have a kickoff meeting. And that's where the management plan will be developed for the next 5 years, and roles and responsibilities will be established for the members. So I believe that now brings us to the end of the presentation, and we are open for discussion and questions.
Thanks, Rebecca. So if any of the current attendees have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand and I can unmute you. I will also take a look at the chat to make sure there aren't any questions that came in while we were working through the presentation.
Lisa, you have a question?
All right, Lisa, I was just trying to unmute you if you
Yes,
still had
I'm
a question.
sorry. I clicked it and muted.
No worries.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa Minhares Kaya. I'm with the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. I've had the pleasure of working with Jay. Really appreciated all the work that you all do on traffic safety culture. I think my question is really just kind of trying to understand the mechanics of a partner who's not at a DOT level. So, you know, and how does that look like in terms of the work actually being accomplished? So if you contribute to the fund as an agency, then does that also mean you're assisting with the projects? And how does that work in terms of deciding who's on these projects and how does that get allocated? Is that clear? Is that a clear question? I'm sorry. I'm trying to word it in a way that makes sense in my head, but I'm like,
Let me give a stab at responding to your question, and then we'll see where it takes us.
okay.
So when a participant contributes to the pooled fund, then they're basically a partner, and they're helping to develop what the projects they would like to see move forward, research type projects, or maybe even like a pilot study. And so any sort of work effort that the board decides, or the TAC decides that they want to take on, then they would create a contract with an entity to do that research. And to this point, the Center for the Health and Safety Culture has been the research entity that has done the research for this project. So if we wanted to go outside of that, it probably wouldn't be a partner that would be doing the work. It would be outside of that relationship. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, thank you. I was just, because I think the interest is on two sides of it for my agency, being a partner, but also doing the work in traffic safety culture space. And so I was just curious what those opportunities were if we were to be a part of this fund. And so that does help to clarify that a little bit better.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right, so I didn't see any questions in the chat. I am not seeing any other hands up with our current attendees. So with that, Rebecca has her email address listed here on this slide. We will, as I said at the beginning, this has been recorded and we will be posting it. I will make sure that all registered attendees receive a link to the recording. And then Rebecca and I also have created a electronic flyer that we will send out with the recording link to some other entities as well, so folks can view this who were not able to attend today. Rebecca, Carrie, Jay, Bill, thank you so much for speaking today. And with that, unless anyone else has anything else to add, we can end for today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.